Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us today. This is our very last installment of TAASA Talks, the 88th session. This will be an extended one because we want to make sure that you all have all the information. A lot happened, a lot of great things happened. And I'm very excited today to have with us just the whole team. When you think about our, huge, great, big state of Texas and all the survivor-centered bills and all the things, like this is the team that got it done at the Texas Capitol. And we're very excited not only to have our team, which is Liz Boyce, who leads the policy team, and Ashley Brooks, the senior policy advisor, and Samantha Pysick. Thank y'all so much for all that y'all done for TAASA and TAASA membership. But we also have Justin Wood. He's general counsel. He is the leader of the policy work over at CAC Texas. We work closely with Justin when it comes to the Sexual Assault Survivor Task Force. So again, when I talk about like our two organizations, when you think about TAASA and CAC Texas working together, I mean, we're a pretty formidable force at the Capitol. And you'll see why after we talk about all the things that we were able to accomplish. But last but not least, y'all always hear me talk about the magical Shannon, the magician, really. I don't know what she just made. I don't know how she does it, but we want her to keep that magic going. And we're excited to have, thank you, Shannon, also for joining us today, and excited for you to kind of explain all the successes that we've had with funding. But before we do that, I wanted to ask you all, we'll just go one by one. If you could summarize your experience at the Capitol at the 88th legislative session in one or two words, what would it be? And we'll start with you, Liz.
Controlled chaos.
And why is that?
Because there's very little control that we have over the all the members and the decisions that are made. But so it feels very chaotic, but we do have some amount of control that we can influence, should I say. So it feels like while everything is maybe out of control, there's some measure of trying to get community support and engagement, and that's thanks to all of you that watch this TAASA Talks and support us from the sidelines. And so, it helps us kind of move forward in some of that chaos.
Listen, I think y'all's strategy y'all had made it a little more manageable. Y'all had a great strategy going in. So I get it. Those two words make sense. How about you, Ashley?
I would say nicer on the outside.
What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I worked in the building for legislators for the last 16 years or so. So this was my first session working outside of the building, and it was a lot nicer. I was able to work only on issues that I believed in and cared about, and I didn't have as many late nights or, stressful last minute mishaps or things to deal with. Yes, nice. Nicer on the outside.
Awesome. Thank you. Samantha, what about you?
I would say positively unique. And echoing a lot of kind of what Ashley said, this is my fourth session, and so this first time kind of outside. And it was, like she said, it was very nice to work on like all things that you really believe in and support. Made it much better for mental health and driving that force of wanting to be there every day and everything. So yeah.
All right, Justin, what about you?
I tried to choose an edited word, one word to describe my experience. I would say trying. I think it was a trying session for me. I've been in and around this work for a long time, and I found it a larger uphill battle to advocate for kids in the building than I have seen before. What kept me energized were a lot of folks on this screen and just staying behind a good mission, but it's trying times in that building, and it always is every time they convene, but this was no different. So I would stick with trying.
Thank you, Justin. I know you were there playing defense as well as offense and every full court press, everything else while you were there. So thank you for that. Shannon, how about you?
Well, I'm going to agree with Justin's trying. word, but I'm also going to add, especially in the budget world, fruitful. I think it was a very fruitful session when it comes to the budget, and I won't get into that until it's my turn, but a lot of good, I think, did happen within the budget. It's not signed yet by the governor, but to be signed. I think there's a lot of good in there.
Awesome.
Look forward to talking about that.
Awesome. Yes. And y'all, last year, I remember when we were having our very last TAASA Talks for the 87th legislative session, I remember saying, oh my God, y'all, what a wild ride, what a wild ending to the session. And boy, did we have the mother of all drama-filled endings this session, although we are going to have special sessions, but my gosh, that's all I'll say about that. But man, oh man, that's, it's very filled with unexpected things and good and bad and everything in between. So with that being said, so yeah, Shannon, let's start with you. The budget. Every time I get on here, I talk about, oh my God, the funding, this is what we're doing, or I'm begging our folks, can you please fill out these surveys? Or I'm always going back and asking for clarifying information. And then I'll come back and I'll say, we're here now, and thanks to Shannon and blah, 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 blah. So can you just describe that whole process, where we are now, the money, the fruitful, outcomes that we have for sexual assault programs and all the things? Can you go ahead and just explain all of that to us, please?
Happy to. I love being able to get on any, I don't want to say podcast, whatever this is, and deliver good news. So luckily, pretty much everything I'm going to deliver today is really good news for crime victims, for our victims that we serve, for the rape crisis centers across the state. So I was going to start by just saying, I think most folks know that the budget process is for 5 months, every odd numbered year. So we just got done with our January through May session, but the budget process really starts way before that. The budget process really starts around the summer prior to the legislative session. So last summer, all the folks on this call, we would get together and talk about what are the needs facing our populations, and what are the asks that we need to make of the legislature when it comes to the budget. And Rose, as you alluded to, those surveys are so impactful for the work that we do, because we use those surveys, to dictate what we ask for, and we use those surveys to show the legislature, here's what we're seeing across our centers across the state. So we're able to be the eyes and ears and representatives at the legislature based on what we're hearing from the folks in the field. We're not making it up, we're listening, and then we're trying to turn that into action for folks across the state. So we came up with an ask. Really, it's going to be 2 pots of funding that I'm going to talk about. And the first is the funding that flows for TAASA and for our centers through the Office of the Attorney General's bill pattern in the budget. And so we had a request for an additional $14 million for the upcoming biennium that we started asking for last summer. And we divided it into really 3 tranches. The umbrella theme that we had was closing the gaps. We have gaps for a variety of reasons, and we want to work to close those gaps. So the first gap was really our rural areas and underserved areas, border areas of the state, that through conversations that Rose and Liz and others had, we really gained a better understanding. I think we held a couple of stakeholder briefings and talked about the challenges that the rurals face that are just different than what you see in Harris County and in Dallas and San Antonio. And so we asked for and received $4 million for a rural access pilot program tailored to how can we start addressing needs that are specific to those regions. And I'm talking about what happened in the past, but I want to also use this opportunity to talk about in the future that we want to partner with centers on this application, making sure that we have folks that are applying for these dollars, and using those dollars, we can go back to the legislature and maybe take the word pilot off of it and say, okay, this is working, and here's what we need. Here are the resources that we need for our rural areas to continue to expand the number of folks that they can serve. The second bucket tranche was, we called it wait lists and increased services. And so we know that the session before last, there were great things that happened, but those things added work to our centers. And so we know that our centers are constantly being asked to do more with the same amount of resources. And so some of the examples, I'm just looking at my notes so I don't forget it, but the SARTs was one of the examples that we would talk about. And then a bill that was on, mandating law enforcement agencies offer a victim of sexual assault presence at investigation interviews. So there's just been some more added requirements on centers. Plus, we know from some of the surveys that we continue to have wait lists at some of our centers. And so that, let me just make sure I'm looking at the right number. It was $9 million for that tranche for wait lists and for some of those services. And then we asked this time for a little bit different, which was $1 million for some statewide coordinations and technical assistance and that sort of thing, so we can have some economies of scale, trying to provide some support. So that's how we got to the 14 million. What ended up happening, which was really, really awesome from our perspective, is Rose came, or was it Liz? I think Rose and Liz tag teamed on a couple of hearings and came and testified in the summer to the legislative budget board and the governor's office saying, here's what we need and here's why we need it. And then we spent the next several months, September through December, working with staff, working with members, telling our story, explaining our need. And what happened was when the introduced budget came out in January, they actually funded our $14 million in that very first version. So that's about as good as you're going to get. We've been following all along to make sure that the money stayed in the budget. It did. And as I alluded to earlier, the governor has until June 18th to sign the budget. We expect him to sign it. I don't think that our, nice program here is going to have any problems getting vetoed, but we want to have that signature, and then we're, ready to start moving to use these funds wisely and to go back to the legislature and tell the story about how we use these funds and what benefit we were able to provide so that we can continue to make sure that the needs are met across the state. The other, and I think I've gone a little bit longer than I was supposed to, so I'll go quickly on this next one.
Okay.
But the other big ticket item was VOCA funds. And I know, Justin's on this call and the CACs actually receive a direct appropriation of VOCA funds, but several of our centers through the COGS and the local communities receive VOCA funds that way. And what happened, without getting too much into the background, 3-4 years ago on the federal level, there were changes that were implemented that really started draining the federal VOCA funds. And the state VOCA at the governor's office was really in trouble in terms of not having sufficient funds. And we were going to see significant cuts within the VOCA program last session. In the meantime, on the federal level, there was a fix to the federal VOCA problem, but it was going to take 4, 5, 6 years to make sure those funds went back up. And so last session before the one we just finished, we worked with the legislature to put $160 million, what we called bridge funding. They used federal ARPA COVID dollars to do that, to start to bridge that time while we're waiting for the federal fix to come back. So luckily the governor's office back in last summer when we were working on our budgets asked for an additional $120 million to continue to bridge this time while the federal dollars are building back up. And that one was not as easy. It did not happen as quickly as we were hoping. It was not in the introduced version, but the governor was asking for those dollars. We really appreciated their ask and for them pushing this with the legislature. Great support with Senator Huffman and Representative Bonin, the chairs of the respective budget committees in the Senate and House. They were supportive of this endeavor and really just trying to drill down to figure out how much is really needed to make sure there's no cut. They ended up in the final days of session putting in $115 million, so just shy of the 120, which we feel like, and they indicated was meant to fully fund that bridge so that we are not going to see a reduction in VOCA funds. So VOCA was maintained, and we got those additional dollars at the Office of the Attorney General. Just want to make a general comment. There's a lot of different funds that fund crime victims. They got a lot of numbers. I won't go through all of them, like 5010, 469. It's fee, the strip club and the court fees. And we run into issues because when those funds don't produce, then there's this conversation about, well, then I guess we don't fund these programs. And we've had such great support from members in the legislature thus far that have come to our aid every time that we were on the chopping block. But talking with some of the budget offices, there is a desire to really look during this interim at these funds. How do we create more sustainability? How do we ensure that, you know, we're not volatile at all times? You all know, how do you run nonprofits when your funding stream is all over the place? Huffman did have a bill looking at additional ways to grow some of these funds, looking at mixed beverage tax, looking at increasing the amount of the fee for strip clubs. So we would love to continue to partner with you all, and we'll be working with the legislature on that during the interim. How do we create sustainability? How do we have reliability for everyone and know what our funding is going to look like? So please keep answering. If you're an entity that receives the surveys, please keep answering them. And please keep providing feedback to all of the folks at TAASA, because we cannot do our work if we don't know what's happening in the field. I will make one more plug. I know there was some late people getting paid late and that sort of thing, and we were able to use that data to work with some of our partners and the agencies to get those done too. So the more we know about what's happening, the better we can do our job. And I'm going to stop there unless you have any more questions, Rose, or y'all want to add anything to what I just said.
I have a quick question, Shannon, and it's probably a dumb question, but I hear a lot about the property taxes and what's going to happen with those. Would that be the delay in signing, or could that be something that would delay the signing of the budget? Is it even attached to the budget? How does that work?
Great question, not a dumb question at all, and most people probably have the same question. So the budget was passed, and the governor has until June 18th to sign it. That is not a changeable scenario. And as you know, he has the opportunity to do line item vetoes. So he will go in and it's not expected that he will veto the entire budget, but he could do some line item vetoes on whatever issue he chooses to. We are in special session. This is the governor's term, number 1. Whenever you say something's number 1, that usually means there's a number 2, maybe even a number 3, and so on and so forth. We're in a special session only on property tax and border security. The House passed a property tax measure, and they sine-died and they left, and they are no longer in session. The Senate continues to be in session, but that's really to no end, because there's not a way for this to be resolved during this special session, with a couple of caveats. Long-ended way of saying the answer to you, Rose. They're different. There are portions of the budget that Abbott may choose to veto to continue, that have relations to border, that have relations to property tax. But the budget, he could veto the entire budget. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think he could just line item a few things out while they continue to work. All of the education bills did not pass, and there is billions of dollars set aside in the budget for education. He could veto all of the education budget, but then that also means he's got to call everybody back in before September. So without getting into too much more detail, I expect him to sign the budget. I expect there to be some line item vetoes. I feel pretty confident that our funding is in a good place, but I like to see the, signature on the dotted line.
Thank you. Liz, I don't know if you have anything to add to that, or anybody. Justin, does anybody have anything to add in regards to funding, budget, or any of that stuff?
I couldn't possibly top the brilliance of Shannon Ghangurde.
No pressure.
And speaking of Liz and the team, okay, so all of you TAASA members, you all voted on priorities, and then our team got those priorities together. And before that, we pulled focus groups. So a lot goes into how TAASA and what informs TAASA's approach to policies. So after all that work was done, we came up with our major legislative priorities, and the team I'm so excited to hear y'all talk about how we fared. So what happened, y'all?
So SB 806, which is our law enforcement connection card bill, it connects survivors with community resources and informs them of their rights. That was signed back on May 19th by the governor. So we are looking at it becoming effective starting September 1st. So we're now in the implementation stage, which is where we kind of coordinate with different stakeholders, such as law enforcement, to kind of get the bill implemented in the way and the vision that we had imagined. So, yeah.
Another one of our priority bills that passed was SB 409, and we've spoken about this before. It's the bill that would not only require prosecutors to converse with the victim about the disposition of their case, but it also allows victims the ability to assert any of their rights that are statutorily granted, either orally or in writing. This bill was sent to the governor on May 29th, and we expect it to be signed into law any day now.
So yeah, 2 out of 3 ain't bad, and we can come back to fight another day for our little bill that could. But I did want to update you all about a different House bill that did pass, for which we provided a lot of back-end support on. And so it's a really great, important bill that we're gonna help push forward in implementation. And this bill was spearheaded by the amazing Tracy Matheson, founder of Project Beloved, whose daughter Molly Jane was raped and murdered in 2017 by a serial offender. Representative Goldman authored this bill. So HB 4628 actually requires law enforcement agencies, crime labs, and DPS to share information with each other in a timely manner after a rape kit is processed in order to advance investigations of sexual assault. So to back up a bit and give you some context, what happens typically with evidence from a sexual assault is that evidence is collected through a forensic exam into a kit. The kit is sent to a crime lab, and if the lab can identify DNA from the evidence, then that DNA gets entered into a federal database called CODIS. So that compares DNA profiles that are already existing in the database. And the purpose is, of course, to catch serial offenders. Now, before this new law, if CODIS indicated a hit, meaning that there was another DNA match in the entries of the database, there was nothing then after that hit to tell labs to let law enforcement know about the hit in a timely manner. So what that meant in practice is that serial offenders wouldn't get caught in a timely manner. So even though we might, as a state, have access to their DNA and know that there was a match there, linking them to multiple cases, nobody was keeping their eye on that ball. So HB 4628 hopes to fix this issue by putting together a notification timeline of sorts for crime labs and DPS that they will need to let law enforcement know when there are hits, CODIS hits, so that law enforcement can do their job in the investigation process and hopefully catch more serial predators like the one that killed Molly Jane. So we're happy to see that the enrolled version of this law also requires law enforcement to notify the survivor about any CODIS hits within 5 business days. So survivor-centered, impactful legislation truly has the potential to save lives, and we couldn't be more thrilled that it passed and was signed into law just today by the governor and will take effect on September 1.
And it was funny, we talked about that today in our Sexual Assault Survivor Task Force, or SASTF. Let's hope Hillary isn't listening. She doesn't like when we call it SASTF. Justin likes it. So we're going to switch gears to SASTF, the task force bill. So as I mentioned earlier, back in the day, right, the 86th legislative session, TAASA worked closely with Texas CAC and Representative Howard's office to inform HB 1590, which put into law the Sexual Assault Survivor Task Force, or SASTF. And so ever since then, we've been working together, not only in bird's eye view and kind of a coordination of stakeholders to make things better and more efficient on the ground. And we have a long way to go, but we've at least started in that direction. But the other big thing, through the leadership of both Justin and Liz, is that we've been able to kind of harness the policy priorities that came from that group, get them through the Capitol, and get most of them, if not all of them, passed. So what I'd like to do is hand this over to Justin and Liz to talk about what were those priorities and how did we fare with the SASTF.
Awesome. Liz, did you want me to start out?
Yes.
Okay,
Great. Yeah.
great. Well, I couldn't have said it better, Rose. Happy to be here with you guys today. For everybody out there listening to us, this is like my team and my posse for the session. And it really has been spurred by the partnership that was created through the task force. We've always appreciated and worked closely with you all, but this has really brought our partnership so much closer. And I've loved being able to champion a lot of your priority bills that you've already highlighted. I'm at the same time getting ready for these same type of updates for our network of CACs. And it's been really awesome to put in writing and see what has gotten across the finish line. So kudos to the TAASA team. And it's been another great session of working together on task force bills. As Rose said, we've now completed our second session of shepherding through the policy recommendations of the task force. We built off the success of 2021 last session when we were able to pass all of the task force recommendations. And a lot of those, if you'll recall, many of you'll recall, were related and surrounding access to medical exams and the forensics part of the equation, rape kits and how they navigate through the system and so forth, getting survivors and child victims access to exams. And we made some great strides last session, and some of our recommendations that came forward this session were building off of that. We collectively as a task force, Liz and I as the policy chairs of that group, take the recommendations as they come to us through the task force. We formulate them into some, nerdy bill language, and then we shepherd them through the Capitol. And that's exactly what we did this time. And we had 12 recommendations. And those started in 5 separate bills. We had different companion bills moving in the House and the Senate. We do that so that we have all bases covered, because you never know where hurdles are going to turn up. And so we had good success with those individual 5 bills moving in different directions. But with any session, you just kind of have to roll with the punches. And in the end, we had consolidated the 12 recs, or as many of those as we could, into 2 bills. And so I just wanted to cover briefly Senate Bill 1401, which was one of the primary and priority legislation bills capturing the task force recommendations. And I'll just briefly cover that. Like I said, we built off the success that we had achieved last session around access to medical exams and forensic medical exams. And we really drilled down on this time. So if you'll recall, we tried to work to remove law enforcement's ability to decline an exam and really put the power and the discretion back in the hands of the survivor or the parent of the child victim in our child abuse world, so that they have ultimate discretion on whether or not a forensic exam is performed on them or a medical exam is performed on them. And that's what it should be. And leaving that discretion to them and the medical professionals that are performing that exam. And so we did that by shifting around some language in the statutes to make it more clear that law enforcement shall always refer that survivor to an exam, and then it's up to them to consent to said exam. So we cleaned up language there to make that more clear in statute. Many of you have been dealt with and continue to deal with there's a form, the Attorney General reimbursement form, that was really for reimbursement for exams, but that law enforcement has continued to rely upon to decline folks for forensic exams. And so we removed all statutory reference to that exam in statute. That form will not exist come September 1st. That's a huge step forward, we hope, in access to exams for both child and adult survivors. So that's one accomplishment in Senate Bill 1401. Another big piece of the recommendations coming from the task force that made it into 1401 was around crime victims' compensation eligibility, and a huge step forward for adult survivors. We know that in many non-report situations that it sometimes can be hard to access crime victim services or CVC funding following that. And because of 1401, Senate Bill 1401, now any survivor who has undergone a sexual assault exam will have been deemed cooperative with law enforcement for CVC purposes. So that's a great step forward in the right direction for our adult survivor population. And then finally, another big significant part of Senate Bill 1401 was working with DPS. DPS, of course, is tasked with notifying survivors about when their kits are and how their kits are being destroyed, or I'm sorry, stored and then destroyed, depending on timelines. Senate Bill 1401 allows DPS to utilize existing technology in their Track It system to be able to push out notifications to survivors in a very survivor-centered way, and for those survivors who have chosen not to report, and still be in compliance with the law. DPS, I work with DPS. DPS is who's over Track It. DPS was still maintaining how they could and be in compliance with current law, but we needed to clean up some of that language, and we did that so that they can remain survivor-centered and remain in compliance with the law. So that's a brief summary of Senate Bill 1401. Liz, more than welcome to fill in any holes there if I missed it.
Yeah, and you may have already mentioned, but it was already signed into law, and so it's going to take effect. The next bill that we worked on with regard to the task force, I kind of think of it like our snowball bill. It started a little bit smaller and it kind of rolled downhill through session, gaining speed and recommendations along the way. So I'll walk you through those. SB 1402 ultimately was authored by Senators Affarini and Senator Paxton. And it began as a simple little law enforcement training bill requiring all peace officers to receive an 8-hour training about trauma-informed investigations of sexual assault. And it actually puts the duty on TCOL, the Texas Commission on Law Enforcement, to establish this course. Now, all officers in the state of Texas will be required to take this training, not just new officers, which will have it offered in their basic peace officer course, but current officers will also have to take the course within a specified amount of time. So that was a great beginning to this little bill. But then early on in session, we needed to make a committee substitute to this bill to lump in the continuation of the Sexual Assault Survivors Task Force. And the original bill that set up, the original law that set up the task force had it to expire in 4 years, which is customary for task forces. But now with the language in this bill, there will be no expiration of the SASTF. And so in addition to that, we made some additional members, added members to the list and statute that would include a survivor of adult sexual assault, survivor of child sexual abuse or their parent or guardian, as well as a representative from the Department of Family and Protective Services. So we already had representatives from each of these groups on the task force, but now they are specifically mentioned in statute. We felt like that was important to include them. And so finally, this bill allows the task force to provide a per diem and travel expenses to non-state agency members and survivors, certainly, for their participation in the task force meetings, and those happen usually quarterly. So at the end of session, so we had those two that were comprised 1402, but then as session neared the end, and we could see some of our fruits dying on the vine and saw the writing on the wall, they got added by amendment in different ways. The one that got added by amendment to 1402 imposes training requirements on hospital staff that work in an emergency room. And this would be trauma-informed care to sexual assault survivors and their crime victims' rights. This is a one-time training for those who perform intake and admin support in an ER. And for the nurses who are already doing these exams, already have forensic training, they may not be certified SANE nurses, but they are given some brief forensic training in their normal nursing schools. This particular bill adds a little bit more prescription around what that training needs to look like and to include evidence collection protocols that are developed by the Attorney General. So the onus is placed on the healthcare facility to make sure that their staff is appropriately trained. And so they have some time to comply with that. Under this law, they have until December 1 of this year to comply. TCOL has until January 1 to establish their course for law enforcement, and all the other pieces of the bill take effect on September 1. This was signed into law by the governor on June 9th. So many of our recommendations were signed into law, and we're very excited about that. And we're going to keep working on those that didn't quite make it over the finish line.
Yes, and I want to take a moment to kind of the significance, to just notate the significance of the bill that's going to, I guess it has SASTF or the task force going on indefinitely. I remember when 1590 was passed, like the historic moment for advocates of both child sexual assault and adults is that we are finally at the table. We have finally arrived. We have been there doing the work for ages. However, our expertise wasn't necessarily ever sought after. We were on the outside looking in. We were on the window saying, let us in on the door. And we were just told to go away, go away. Bills are being made, laws are being passed that didn't make any damn sense. And so now that we are at the table, that 1590 did that for us. So I just wanted to say, wow, now this is something that is going to go on. There's no expiration date. We have arrived. I mean, this is really great for child sexual assault victims, for adult sexual assault victims, and just sexual assault in general, you know, in our state of Texas. And I have to say, y'all, we are leading the nation in this. Now, are we perfect? No, we're not. And we are committed to making things better. We are committed to putting survivors up front and center. We're going to stumble along the way, but the commitment is there. The dedication is there. We've got the right people at the table, including centering survivors themselves and the advocates who have been working on their behalf for a very long time. So I just wanted to, that's a moment. I was, just wanted us to acknowledge that, and for our folks to really recognize, like, this is a big deal. But thank you to Justin and Liz who got it through. I mean, we thought about it and we crafted it as a task force, but it doesn't go anywhere unless someone's pushing it through the Capitol, and that's what y'all did. Thank y'all so much for that. So,
well, and Rose, it was pretty cool. I mean, for those of you, I mean, that may be aware, the governor signs a lot of bills, and he only holds bill signing ceremonies for certain bills. And last week he held a signing ceremony for Senate Bill 1402 that continued the task force, and it was really cool to hear his comments and commitment to this work, and really recognizing that, because I think a testament to the work of the last 4 years, that the task force work will be permanent in Texas. There's a lot of work left to do, and it's really exciting to see the just overall support. And I can say, Liz and I can report that from in the halls of the Capitol really resonates in that building too. Lots of bipartisan support around our issues, and now it's like, oh, this is a task force recommendation. Okay, so we'll build off of that credibility, hopefully, and keep pestering them with our recommendations next time.
Yes, thank you. And yeah, speaking of governor, special sessions, he gets to call them. So can y'all, I know Shannon kind of alluded and started the conversation, but I don't know, Ashley, what's going on? What's going to happen with special sessions?
Right. I mean, Shannon honestly covered mostly what's going on with this first session, special session. So the governor, he called it on the very last day of the regular legislative session on May 29th. And as Shannon mentioned, the expressed issues for which he requested the legislature to reconvene for the special session was to address cutting property taxes and to enhance penalties for human smuggling and operations of stash houses. As of yet, no bills have passed, and it's not likely that any of them will. Again, for the details that Shannon offered, basically short version is that the House and Senate cannot come to an agreement on how to address these issues. So I think it is very likely that as soon as this special session ends, the governor will call another one and put these same two issues back on the call to be addressed by the legislature and possibly include others.
Yeah. So as Ashley said, like, the special session process is very special, to say the least. The governor can call a special session for anything he wants. Usually it's priorities that, didn't pass during the regular session. So, that requires the House and Senate to come back and get that work done. So, he's got 30 days for each special session, but if they finish getting this stuff done before then, they can sine die, gavel out earlier, which is what the House did. So, but, we'll keep you guys posted if there is any special sessions that kind of have agenda items related to our work, and keep you guys posted on that.
I have to say, the stash houses, I don't know, Shannon, if you remember the one town hall that we did of the border, but the programs at the border, they mentioned the stash houses and how that affects and the work. And there's, the intersection of all the things, sexual assault, human trafficking. I mean, so on one note, glad to hear that it's even being discussed. But, I know that, as y'all mentioned, it's going to be a hard road ahead to get those things done. So, yeah, I mean, I just have to say, again, very thankful to all of you for joining us today that are listening in. I warned you earlier it was going to be an extended version, but we wanted to make sure that we really shared all the information because this is our very last TAASA Talks for this legislative session. We will get to work on the implementation and get all that together. And but I also wanted to say thank you to just the elected officials. Like, they have worked tirelessly. And again, not only them, but we've worked with other agencies, as Justin mentioned, TAASA, Texas CAC, Texas. We work together on a host of things, one of which is being at the Capitol to make sure survivor-centered laws are getting through. And again, y'all have heard me mention Shannon, either on TAASA Talks or Shannon when I'm at your offices and I'm talking about funding. And just, Shannon, very thankful that you were able to be here today as well to share your brilliance and give us a little insight into how your mind works and how things and how just the process works. I know that's going to be helpful. And I know our membership and our folks will be very thankful to that. And then I know that we're Liz, I'm going to hand it over to Liz and she's going to talk about all the different legislators. But I wanted to say, when you see that list, what you'll see is elected officials all across the board representing various pockets of Texas, representing various geographic areas, rural versus urban all together. And not only that, of all political stripes on, the different levels of those politics, all of them coming together to do the people's work of sexual assault and centering survivors in that charge. So I personally want to thank all those folks on behalf of TAASA membership, on behalf of TAASA, the organization, for the elected officials, if any of them are listening. To all of you, thank you so much for, kind of getting rolling up your sleeves and getting to work and getting those things done for your constituents that will benefit from all the things that were passed. And so, yeah, I'd like to hand it over to Liz to kind of give some more thank yous.
Thank you, Rose. We are so grateful to all of our legislative partners. And, the tireless hours of getting together committee subs, amendments, long hours on the floor. Certainly all of their awesome staff that fielded our very, very late night into the midnight hour of panic-stricken texts and questions and just thoughts and strategies, some of whom actually took time to visit with us one-on-one early on in session to understand all of the issues. We do want to say thank you to each single one, and I'm going to name them off individually because they're just amazing people. Senator Paxton, thank you. Senator Huffman, Senator Hinojosa, Senator Zaffarini, Senator Alvarado, Representative Howard, Representative Leach, Representative Manuel, Representative Ann Johnson, Representative Goldman, Representative Bonin, Representative Sinfronia Thompson, and of course, Representative Mary Gonzalez. You guys all did such hard, tremendous work. And on behalf of sexual assault survivors, we thank you. I also want to personally thank my amazing policy team, Ashley and Samantha, for their very, very hard work all session getting to the finish line. Shannon, of course, for her brilliance on everything funding. Justin, for being my partner in crime on the task force bills and my constant companion through the session. Courtney, for her fabulous facilitation skills of TAASA Talks all session long, and Rose for being our very fierce supporter and fearless leader. Thank you so much. And we also, of course, would be remiss if we didn't thank all of you, you loyal viewers of TAASA Talks, for engaging in our work, and cheering us on from the sidelines, the survivors and the subject matter experts who came to the Capitol to testify and wrote public comments in support of these bills, the very long hours, the long days of sitting and waiting for a committee to be heard. It's hard work, and we just thank you so much for being there and for helping us lift up the voices of survivors. Our work could not have been done without all of you. We really appreciate it. We want to make sure that you watch your emails for any upcoming training materials and webinars that we're going to be offering around legislative updates. And as always, let us know if you have any questions about any of these laws or any others that you might have a question about. We may or may not have an answer, but we'll do our best. So any last thoughts from you, Rose?
Also wanted to thank just the Public Safety Office over at the Governor's Office, just for their always providing us information when we had questions, and also staff over at the Office of the Attorney General also providing us information when we had questions about various things. So very thankful to those two agencies, and also again to Shannon. Shannon, thank you so much for again. I will say it again. I remember my very first big decision when I became, in this position at TAASA, the executive director of TAASA, was whether, I was like, what's going on? Oh, this person. Okay. And I talked to you, I was like, yes, let's do. So my, like hiring or contracting, with Shannon, and boy, the angels and guides and gods and universe, everything was aligning it with red flares saying, way to go. Because I tell you what, you have really influenced the movement and revolutionized how we do the work, Shannon. That is really, and I will take a little credit only because I said, yeah, let's hire her. Let's get her. So thank you, Shannon, for all that you've done for us.
It's my pleasure to work with you all. It's my joy to get to be with so many smart people passionate about the work. So thank you.
And ditto, the child victims of Texas, thank you too, Shannon, because we get to also utilize her brilliance and wisdom in our world too. So kudos.
All right. Any last parting words from any of y'all to anybody? I know y'all had some really great stories. I know we don't have time for that now, but heartwarming stories of just kind of what your interactions with, but anything else that y'all want to say before we close out? Anybody? Y'all okay? All right.
Look us up for some drinks later and we'll fill you in on all the dirty details.
Yes. Thank y'all so much. Have a good day, and I appreciate it. And thank you all for being here, and thank you all for participating, the folks on the screen. Thank you.
Thanks.